We have a lot to talk about today. Where would you like to begin? Scott?
Should we talk about 2%?
Sure.
It already seems like some members of council are thinking even 2% is too high. What do you think?
I think we have to be super realistic, even as we're going into an election year, on what kind of services we want to provide. We have increased taxes by less than the rate of inflation plus population growth for some time now. And we have to ensure that we are really focused on services that are needed. You know, I'll give you an example. I got an email from a citizen in Evanston recently, and she was saying, look, the population of Evanston has doubled. How come we still have such lousy bus service? And the answer is because we haven't budgeted for any increases in transit, even as the city geographically continues to grow. I think 2% coming in less than projected inflation and tax growth is probably fair, with one thing that I do want to say, which is we are pushing hard on administration, we'll continue to push hard on administration to find even more efficiencies, even more than the $325 million that have already been found. And so if they're able to come in at less than 2%, or if the new council in November is able to find cuts that they can live with that take it below 2%, I think that would be great. But I'd like to see a scenario that does that, as well as a scenario that is a key, that shows us what would happen at that 2% that's being recommended.
Where is the breaking point on that, given that Calgarians would look at this and say, well, why weren't you cutting costs and saving money years ago?
Well, of course we have been. Since the moment I was elected, we have been very, very careful about the zero-based budgeting process, about finding efficiencies. We're working our way through department by department and finding millions of dollars in efficiencies in each place. It's something we got to do. Now, to be fair to my predecessors, the city was growing pretty fast, and the system was pretty broken, and it was hard to even keep up. And now that we're in an economic downturn, we actually have the chance to take a little bit of a breath and assess where we are and see how well we're doing with these zero-based reviews, as well as the other things we're doing to find efficiencies, and we'll keep doing that. But as I've said before, as far as governments go, this one's actually pretty efficient. You know, I think about the fact that I have oftentimes had to call in the city manager to see if we could find $2,500 or $5,000 for some emergent issue. I'm pretty sure the Premier doesn't worry about those numbers, and we do every single day here. So at some point, when you look at our core services, transportation, fire, police, transit, water, waste, you know, you have to really say, if you want to keep continuing to cut, at some time you're going to have to pull back on those services. And I think those are the questions that politicians and citizens have to ask. You know, on landfill, for example, we've cut back the hours on the landfills in order to recognize the fact that we have less volume and less revenue. And man, people are complaining about cutting back the hours on those landfills, which you'd think would be a relatively small thing. So these are the kinds of conversations we have to have with citizens. And of course, we do all of this. We provide citizens with this great level of satisfaction, higher than most cities, if not all cities in the country, for among the lowest taxes in the country. That's something I'm actually pretty proud of.
On the Green Line issue, what's your reaction to the two MPs and the city councillor who issued a release yesterday and are talking about how upset they are about this?
I think it's entirely fair to ask a lot of questions. And as you know, we've been grappling with the Green Line for years now, asking and answering these questions. And I hope that we'll ask and answer a lot more questions this afternoon when we talk about it. I think that's entirely fair. I think anyone who's been following this debate would not be particularly surprised at where we've ended up. As I said, when council passed the underground alignment for the downtown, you understand this is going to increase the price of the whole thing and limit what we can do within an existing budget. But it was the right thing to do. It's the right long-term decision. And so that's what council has to grapple with. The thing that is sort of ironic and funny about this is that the city had been planning for a long time to build this whole network as a bus rapid transit network. It was actually the then federal government, Ms. Rempel and others, who phoned us up just before an election and said, we want to have a press release, we want to have a press conference this week to take it to LRT. How much is that going to cost? It was actually their own doing to push this thing forward. So we gave them a number based on a surface alignment on the Center Street Bridge and through downtown, and then proceeded to do tons of detailed engineering and detailed consultation to figure out what people really wanted, and this is where we've ended up today. So it's a bit funny for a member of that government who started all of this without any studies to criticize us for actually doing the studies.
So did you think some of the criticism was over the line?
Well, politicians will do what politicians will do. Politicians have their own ambition. I am moved by evidence and data, and that is what I will continue to work from.
Does it have to be shorter?
Does it have to be shorter? I've kind of gone through the 5 stages of grief on this one. If council really, really believes that the underground alignment through downtown and the Beltline is the right thing to do, build it right the first time, and we don't get more money, then the opening day scenario has to be a bit shorter. But I need to tell you this is really important, is that this is 10 years of construction, regardless. And so what's before us today is the opening day scenario. On opening day in 2026, that train will run from Crescent Heights to Shepherd. By 2026, pending funding, we're not going to stop building. We're going to keep building out the rest of it. But what I wanted was a scenario where we got as much of it running as quickly as possible so people could start riding it. And if we had flipped it and done the north end first, we know that's slower. So it would have been a couple more years before people could ride it. But my goal, and the goal of I hope whoever sits in the mayor's chair from here on in, will be to get the funding so that we never stop building, so that we continue construction until all 40 kilometers are built.
Where do you expect to get the funding from, since for phase 1 you've tapped the taxpayer, you've tapped the province hopefully, and you've tapped the feds? So where would you get money for phase 2, do you think?
There's 2 things here. Number one is if there's an interesting procurement process here that can leverage private capital. I'm not sure it's there, but we'll look for it. But remember that the federal government funding is over 11 years. So in fact, by the time it opens, we'll be into a new stage of federal funding. If the province matches the federal funding's time flow, then again, we'll be in a new stage of provincial funding even before it opens. And so we'll be able to continue that way. I think that's what people are forgetting. It's such a long construction period that programs and governments will change. I likely will not be in this chair in 2026. Is that a scoop? But we will continue to work through and get this thing done.
What do you say to those people who are, even though it's been broadcast extensively, who are just disappointed that the route only goes a little ways in the north and not as far as they'd like in the south?
I'm disappointed. I'm hugely disappointed by it, and that's why I really pushed council hard on the expensive parts, the downtown parts, to say, is good enough good enough? Do you want to go further? But at the same time, this is, let's remember, by far the largest investment in public transit in Alberta's history, by far. 4 times bigger than anything we've ever done before. And as a result, thousands and tens of thousands of people will benefit from this right away, and hundreds of thousands of people will benefit from it by the time we're done.
Given the tunnel and given the maintenance facility, for stage 1, is this it? Like you can't move further north or further south without more money, right?
Yes and no. So yes, that is the answer. However, this also bakes in a very large contingency for that tunnel. So if our bids come in lower, or if we don't need all of that contingency, then the good news about the way that the opening day scenario is done is the hardest parts are first. So if money is freed up, it's relatively easy to just keep building track on both the south and the north end to the next station or to the station after that. That is not including the debt services. So we know that the city's portion is over 30 years and there's very significant interest payments. We know that the federal government's portion is likely to be over 11 years. We don't have a sense of how much the timing is, what the timing is on the province's portion, and that will radically change how much is needed for debt servicing.
Is there any sort of idea you have of how much that debt servicing would be? Some people say over $1 billion, some people say hundreds of millions.
It's really hard to say right now because we don't know the province's cash flows. Once we know the province's cash flows, which hopefully will be in place by the time council makes a budget decision in November, it'll be much easier to say. I mean, if the province and the feds were both to match the city's cash flows, and we already know the feds are not, they're doing it much faster. But if they were to match it, then you are looking at well over $1 billion of debt financing,
Can I ask you about the
which is just money that goes to the bank. And I'd rather have that money not go to the bank and go to building things.
Can I ask you about the possibility of the NEB moving out of Calgary?
I have only just seen a summary of the federal government's proposal, or federal government's, I don't know what it is, consultation panel. It's proposal, and I got to tell you, the summary got me a bit steamed because it seemed to imply that a Calgary-based organization cannot be biased. I must be biased. Let's try that again. It seemed to imply that a Calgary-based organization must be biased because it's in Calgary. That is a ridiculous assertion. Absolutely ridiculous, and I hope that the federal government will push back on that very strongly.
because you think the NEB should stay in Calgary.
Of course the NEB should stay in Calgary. What's the point of having the regulatory body far removed from where the hearings have to be and where all the players are? It just adds cost and complexity to the situation. It's worked well in Calgary. There are some things that need to be fixed. But if we come up with a regulator that is truly science-based, that makes good decisions, of course it has to be in Calgary. That there's no question of that.
Is there any particular role that the municipal government can play in trying to push that, or is it more so just kind of lending your voice to the issue?
Let me read the report first, and then I will certainly not be shy about lending my voice to that issue.
Do you have any reaction to a video that happened last week at council with the one that I'm referring to, Ward Sutherland and Drew Farrell?
Yes?
What are your thoughts?
There's two possible interpretations of what you saw in that video. If you believe the evidence of your eyes, then you will see a councillor behaving in a rather juvenile and derogatory manner to another councillor. If you believe that councillor's story, he wasn't looking at her at all, but he was behaving in a derogatory and juvenile fashion relating to another councillor. Those are both bad, and those are both deeply unacceptable. Really unacceptable kind of behaviors. Now, some people are saying it's misogynistic and juvenile, some people are saying it's just juvenile. Either way, that kind of behavior is not acceptable. I would expect that that councillor would apologize. Because even if you believe his story to be true, in the middle of a very important land use decision on 1,000 new homes in the community of Dalhousie, with the community association sitting right there, we had councillors who weren't paying attention, who were joking about something else, who were texting one another on the very day that we had a discussion at council about respect in a public hearing. I think citizens deserve better than that. I think that all of these councillors are here because they want to work hard, but I think an apology is absolutely due at this point.
What could the sanction be for this if the Integrity Commissioner finds this is inappropriate?
Look, this is a question for the Integrity Commissioner, and I think what the Integrity Commissioner is going to have to work out is whether this is a one-time thing or if we've seen a pattern of erratic behavior from this councillor or from others, and determine what the right sanction is there. Certainly I know that just on the social media today we're hearing lots of comments from citizens, but ultimately I'm very glad that we set up the Integrity Commissioner process to have a retired judge look at these sorts of things, because this stuff does matter, and it's important to have that impartial voice to it.
Thank you very much.
In terms of an apology, do you want to see one in council chambers or right now?
Well, if I were in this position, I would probably apologize in council chambers now, but if you want to wait to see what the Integrity Commissioner recommends, that is possible as well.
Thank you.